What I cannot crush with words, I will crush with the tanks of the Imperial Guard. Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Morty and Glory video. In today's episode, I'm going to show you my tournament Armoured Company list. That's right, it's time for the metal boxes to hit the competitive scene, and everybody knows that Guard players love, and I mean love, their tanks. For many Guard players, there is nothing better than destroying the meta and grinding it beneath their metal tracks. But the Guard motor pool is pretty extensive, and it can be difficult to know which tanks you should prioritize putting into your Armoured Company. So what I'm going to do today is take you through step by step each of the units in this list and give you a little bit of an explanation as to why I've chosen them and some of the tactics for those individual units and what they contribute to the army as a whole. So with all that said, let's mount up, roll out, and drive right into today's episode. The first thing I want to do is address the elephant in the room. And no, I'm not talking about your mother. This is a meme list. It's a SKU list. It pretty much embodies the mantra, reject the meta, embrace the Guard. The advantage of taking an Armoured Company is many of your opponent's lighter weapons are massively less efficient against you. If they've got a bunch of anti-infantry in their army, well, all of those weapons are basically useless against you. And what anti-tank they do have, you're probably going to overwhelm it through sheer mass. It's also highly likely that you are going to have the advantage in a firefight. You will have superior firepower, and the main tactic of this list is going to be to blow your enemy off the table. It's also a surprisingly mobile army. Even with lots of L-shaped ruins and dense terrain, every unit in this army moves at least 10 inches without diminishing their damage output. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because Armoured Company lists do have some very severe disadvantages. One of the big ones is you have next to no close combat capability. Sure, things are a little bit better in 10th edition, with vehicles hitting on 4s and most of the tanks here getting 6 attacks each, but with no AP and only 1 damage, you're really not going to fight your way out of this. On top of that, whilst you can shoot out of combat these days, with the dense terrain that we mentioned before, your fire lanes might be a little bit disrupted. You could get move blocked in the worst possible places, and even if you do have a target, you're going to be -1 to hit a lot of the time as well. On top of this, your objective play is suboptimal, to say the least. You don't really have any cheap units that you can just use as action monkeys. If you pull investigate signals, you very well may have a 180 or 200 point tank sat there doing an action, getting you some points, and not doing what you want to do, which is shoot the enemy. But on the other hand, your opponent's going to have a field day when he sees your army, because he can pick fixed objectives and easily max out things like bring it down. Now that's the crash course on Armoured Company tactics, but now let's get into the specific detail, the nitty-gritty of this list. And let's begin with the head of the snake, the top of the chain of command, the characters. And of course, we have gone for 3 tank commanders in this army. Now we've gone for 2 long-range tank commanders with battle cannons, and then we've gone for 1 short-range tank commander with a demolisher cannon. We've also enhanced one of our tank commanders with Grand Strategist, this chap here poking out the tank, so he'll be able to do 2 orders. Now the reason we've gone for this 2-to-1 split of long-range firepower to short-range firepower is, well, we kind of expect our tank commanders to be a bit safe behind the lines. They want to be providing long-range fire support, but more importantly, they are a very important force multiplier in our army. They are our only sources of orders in this list, and orders, no matter what Guard list you're running, are very, very important. So having 2 of them a little bit further back does keep them a bit safer and will allow them to keep boosting up our forces. But there's no escaping the fact that sometimes you do need to get up close and personal. Sometimes you do need to go into the eye of the storm. And so having one tank commander who doesn't mind getting a bit closer, who's packing a lot of heat and should be able to do a lot of damage when he does get close, is never a bad thing. Now, I just want to head off a couple of points here. Firstly, you may have noticed that the sponson weapons on a couple of my Leman Russes aren't ideal. I've got heavy bolters when really going for plasma cannons or multi-melt, something a bit more punchy would be better. These Leman Russes are old school boxy Russes. I've actually had these from about 2nd and 3rd edition. And back in the day, your sponsons were kind of just stuck with either heavy bolter or plasma cannons. And with these tanks, I've got heavy bolters on them. If I was to run this as optimized as possible and I had all the models that I needed, I would, more than likely, give these tank commanders plasma cannons. But there's nothing wrong with heavy bolters. They've still got a good range. They've got decent fire rate, sustained hits. But I do find that the extra AP of the plasma tends to be a little more useful. I also know that some people might be scratching their heads and saying, Mordian, where is the Lord Solar? Surely he would be perfect for this army. Well, I did play around with putting the Lord Solar in, but a little bit like with the mechanized list that I showed off in a previous video, I found that he was taking too much away from the overall armoured posture. When you take a Lord Solar and then a command squad and then an infantry squad, it's going to cost you 240 points. That will get you 3 orders, but that is a lot of points going away from taking tanks. And then I had a look at my list and was like, well, I want to be including at least 6 Russes anyway. Why not just spend a few points upgrading those Russes to tank commanders? If you look at these 3 tanks here, we've got 2 with battle cannons, 1 with the martial cannon. Rather than spending 240 points to get 3 tank orders, it's cost me 25 points to upgrade this guy from a Leman Russ to a tank commander. It's cost me 25 points plus 15, so 40 because of the enhancement, so 40 points in total to upgrade this guy to a tank commander. And then it's cost me 5 points to upgrade this Demolisher to a tank commander. So in total, that is 70 points to get 4 orders on vehicles that I was already planning on including in my list anyway, versus 240 points to get 3 orders. I'm actually getting more orders for a cheaper level. But moving on from the tank commanders, we do have 5 more main battle tanks in this army. We have got a Leman Russ battle tank with battle cannon, heavy bolters, lads cannon. Again, another boxy Russ there. We've got 2 Leman Russ exterminators. We've got a Leman Russ eradicator, and we've got, I know, shock horror, a Leman Russ vanquisher. Now the stars of the show are these 3 tanks here. We've got a Leman Russ battle tank, an El Clasico with the battle cannon, las cannon, and 2 heavy bolters. He's a take all comers. His weapon can tear a chunk out of most enemies. The fact it's flat damage 3 really does sting, and don't forget, he does get full rerolls to hit against enemy units on objectives. And 40 game by and large is a game about standing on objectives. Sure, the battle cannon's only AP -1. But this leads me on to the next 2 tanks, the exterminators. Probably the best tank in the guard right now. If I owned 3, I'd probably have 3 in this list. The strength 9 is good enough, especially when you've got twin linked, meaning it actually can do more than scratch the paint of heavy armor. And it's also flat damage 3. But the big deal, the main reason you take them, is their ability, Withering Hail, which puts extra AP on enemy units. So if these exterminators fire first, then every other unit in the army should be getting extra AP on whatever target they threw their autocannon shells into. As you can see, these are newer patterns of Leman Russ. So I've been able to swap those heavy bolter sponsons out for the multi-melter. The multi-melter sponsons are very powerful. They are going to pack a hell of a punch, and their 18-inch range isn't such a problem, because these Russes typically want to be within 24-inch range anyway, because when they do, they get double the shots from their main turret weapons because they are rapid fire 4. We then get to the filler, the Eradicator and the Vanquisher. Now originally these were Hellhounds in the list, but I had some points left over at the end, And rather than trying to cram in like a lone sentinel or something, I was like, why not just upgrade the Hellhounds? Because a bad Leman Russ is still better than a Hellhound. And at the end of the day, they're still tanks. Sure, when you compare a Vanquisher to an Exterminator, the Exterminator seems so much better. But let's just put this into perspective. They're just as durable, and they've still got a hell of a lot of firepower. Las cannons, plasma cannons, las cannons, heavy stubbers, hunter killers, vanquishers, eradicators. It's still not a bad amount of firepower at all. So in its own right, both of these vehicles are very viable because they're cheaper. They're helping me get into really high numbers of armor, and as a result, they are contributing significantly to the overwhelming amount of tank we are bringing in this list. The same logic is applied to the Hydra. Now, in the lore, this might be a dedicated anti-flyer, but on the tabletop, it's just a cheap, poor man's Eradicator. Yeah, it doesn't have Withering Hail, but it's got the same damage. It's Strength 9, it's 8-1, it's Flat Damage 3, and it gets Twin Linked. So it's just adding more and more firepower, and it's another hull in the list. These three vehicles, the Hydra, the Eradicator, and the Vanquisher, they definitely make up the vehicles that are way more sacrificial. If I need a unit to push forward onto an objective that I know is probably going to die, or if I need to screen an enemy out, I'll be putting those three on the front lines. They are going to be catching bolt shells and las cannon beams, whilst the rest of the vehicles actually do the damage and get the job done. Finally, we have the artillery support. Even in an armoured company list, you need indirect fire. There is so much line of sight blocking terrain. There's so many places that your opponent can hide. Cheap units, little 5-man squads of intercessors that just sit on primary objectives and score them points turn after turn. You need indirect fire to make that not a possibility. You have got so much firepower in this list that many opponents will just try and hide from it. You need the artillery to take that option away from them, make them uncomfortable, and force them out into the open. We've gone for 2 Basilisks and 1 Manticore. The reason we've done that is the Basilisks are a bit cheaper, and when you are shooting at those cheap infantry units like the aforementioned intercessors, they're more than enough to get the job done. They're the flat damage 2, and they've got the strength 8, and also they can do some movement shenanigans. If you hit someone with the Basilisk, it does slow their movement and advancing down. But occasionally you will come across someone who's going to put quite a tough unit on an objective, and so the extra strength and damage of the Manticore will be important then. Now, the overall plan with this list is to break it down into 3 to 4 battle groups. Over here, we've got the long-range tanks, and we've got 3 orders and 3 tanks that can be ordered. These guys are going to be sitting back, doing damage, but also slowly moving forward, just edging up the board, getting onto objectives where possible, scoring what primary points they can. But really, they're focused on doing damage to the opponent. Sometimes we'll bring all of these together into one big battle group, and they'll just go down a flank together and completely clear it. But sometimes the terrain won't allow for that kind of like mass maneuver, in which case we'll break down into the 2 smaller ones. In either case, we're going to have orders to support all the tanks and an exterminator for the extra AP, and we can do the same here as well. We then have our second main battle group, and these are going to be, well, frankly, the cannon fodder. We've got a tank commander with 1 order to help support them where needed, but the damage from these guys isn't really what we're after. They're going to be pushing forward, pushing deep strikers back, being a bit of a nuisance, and they might even be the first ones to make it onto objectives. Now, sometimes these guys are going to be used in 4 separate groups, essentially. 1 going down the left, doing some screening, so on and so forth. But if we're playing an objective like supply drop, where there's sort of 1 primary objective, the Omega objective, then we bring all of these together and we're like, you know what? It might not do the most damage, but sticking 4 hulls onto the Omega objective on a mission like that, that's going to be difficult for the enemy to shift. Finally, we have the independent artillery support. These guys don't need any orders, and they're just going to sit behind the line sight blocking terrain in the far corners, just not going anywhere near the front, just holding the objective that's typically in our deployment zone. They don't need orders because they hit on ballistic skill 4+, and they've got the heavy special rule. Even when they're shooting indirect fire, they're hitting on 4s. That's good enough for me. Mass batteries there, that'll get the job done. And you've got to remember that when they stay still, they'll benefit from Born Soldiers, which gives them 6s to auto wound, gives them lethal hits. So they don't really need any support. They're just going to sit on the home objective, blasting away, harassing the opponent, and taking them off objectives that they're trying to sneak away with those little 5-man units. Well, that's the plan at least, but as they say, no plan survives contact with the enemy, and I will be taking this into the competitive scene to a local 1-day 3-round RTT tournament. I expect that it might... I don't think it will lose every game, but I suspect that it might go 1-2 or 2-1. I think it'll catch 1 or 2 players off guard. They won't quite have enough anti-tank to deal with it, but then it's going to bump into someone that's just either got a better list or just has enough anti-tank, at which point I think it's going to collapse and not quite go the full distance. But hey, at least that's like my opinion, man. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What do you think about this list? What would you change to improve it? And how do you think it's going to perform at the tournament? Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, August Vardy, and the Tommies. Thank you guys, your incredible support makes a huge difference, and it is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.